Welcome to the inaugural episode, the very first episode of the After Action Report. I'm Nick Guy, I'm your host, and I'm one of the millions of unqualified, self absorbed, self described experts that think that you need to hear what I have to say. This is a great new project that I've decided to undertake. It's nothing that the world needs, but it's something that I want to do. And the last time I checked, this is America, and I'm free to do whatever I want. So, with that being said, welcome to the new podcast. This is going to be a really fun project. It's not going to be super formal, super serious, mainly because I don't know how to make it super formal or super serious. I am an absolute illiterate with this editing software. I don't know how it works. I'm barely getting by with a few YouTube tutorials. So we're going to try and make this at least somewhat palatable to you, the viewer. I've been sharing hot takes on Twitter for the past couple of months. I really stepped up my Twitter game, but you're limited to 240 characters. So I thought, Nick, you idiot, start a podcast. That's what everybody else is doing. So here we are. So this is going to be a little bit of a, and as this develops, I hope to bring in guests and bring in people that actually know what they're talking about beyond just my self-absorbed ramblings. But at least in the beginning, we're going to be taking a look at topics that kind of focus on national security, foreign policy, and the military. I'm going to try to provide a little bit of a unique perspective on it. If you guys don't know, I am a United States Army Green Beret. That's a colloquial term. I'm an Army Special Forces communications sergeant, which is ironic because I don't know how to work this equipment. But I bring a unique perspective. I bring a viewpoint that I think a lot of people don't get to experience. And I think what I have to say is not that important. But if you like it, hey, tag along. I'm not going to complain. So we're gonna run the gambit of news outside our borders, military issues, foreign policy. I'm not a NatSec wonk. I have a bachelor's in political science. Like, it's not that impressive. But I do have some decent overseas experience when I was with 5th Special Forces Group, and I'm currently with 19th Special Forces Group, which means that I play Green Beret part-time. It's a unique perspective. I kind of have one foot in the military world and one foot in the corporate world. And I'm currently working in financial intelligence. And trust me when I say it sounds way more interesting than it actually is. So, now that introduction is out of the way, you kind of know who I am. Let's just get right into it. It's a big news day. We're coming to you on the 5th of November, 2019, in the year of our Lord, if that's your thing. I have Twitter queued up. I have a couple news stories queued up. I have a White Claw sitting here. I'm not sponsored by White Claw, but White Claw, if you're listening, that is cold, crisp, and delicious. Yeah, so it's probably the most basic thing about me besides my love of all things autumn and crafting and pumpkins and sweater weather and Instagram shots that all my gal pals love. But beyond that, I say let's just get right into it. You'll see, if you guys are watching this podcast, you see me, and then you also see a split screen. I'm going to be pulling up some things so you guys can follow along. If you guys are listening, I'm going to do my best to paint a picture for you. I like to think that I can kind of give an accurate representation of what's on the screen. If you guys are in the car and decide to listen to this on whichever platform will accept me, whether it be Spotify or iTunes, well, we're gonna see. We're gonna see. Like I said, this is kind of just a trial run, and it feels ridiculous just talking to myself on camera in my bar room. Don't worry. We're going to get through it together. All right, without further ado, guys, let's jump right into it. Big news today, and it's absolutely heartbreaking. A family in Mexico, American citizens, were gunned down and murdered in northern Mexico, and it's an awful story. It's kind of one that pulls at the heartstrings, mainly because children were involved, and nobody likes to see that. It was especially when you take a look at cartel violence, and I'm not an expert by any stretch of the imagination. I don't claim to know, the ins and outs of the cartel world and the intricacies of the drug trade and how it plays into Mexican domestic policy and U.S. border policy. But looking at it just from the layman's perspective, and that's all I'm claiming here, is it's a story that kind of captured the headlines. And as a few people have pointed out, people just suddenly cared. And some commentators were saying, oh, it's because they were white or things like that. But I think, honestly, a lot of people, and myself included, but maybe not to the extent that I should have been talking about this whole cartel issue. And it stems from the fact that it seems foreign to us, even though it's right there on the border, and we see criminality cross the border. We're finding cartel violence on U.S. soil. It doesn't really hit home to us. And I think the media is partly to blame because they don't want to cover it. There are some phenomenal journalists who do cover it, and almost exclusively, but I don't think anybody's really listening to them. But this story grabbed headlines. One, because the absolute brutality of what happened, but secondly, there were children involved. Excuse me. But thirdly, it was finally Americans that were the victims of cartel violence. And like I said, I'm not an expert. I don't claim to be an expert. If I were to claim an expertise in something, it would probably be the Middle East. But on this, I'm just a weekend warrior when it comes to cartel violence and U.S. policy on the border and things like that. But this story is absolutely awful. ABC has a pretty decent write-up on what happened. But the long and short of it is that there's a family of American Mormons that had settled in northern Mexico, and the reason kind of ranges, and some outlets are reporting it was due to religious discrimination. If you are the terrible editorial staff on the New York Times that approved this tweet, and I quote, "The brutal killing of 9 members of an American family in northern Mexico on Monday highlights the long history of religious fundamentalist settlers in the region. Our religion reporter, Elizabeth Diaz, details their history back to the early 20th century." And first off, let's just say everybody knows it. The New York Times is getting dragged online for this headline and this tweet because it is incredibly insensitive. But I guess some American Mormons had settled in Mexico due to possibly some polygamy laws. Not entirely sure. Doesn't matter. The fact of the matter is this family of American citizens was living in Mexico. And right now, the reports all state that this is potentially a case of mistaken identity of the cartels thinking that this convoy of vehicles that contained this family was a rival cartel. And it points to a couple of things. All of a sudden, violence at the border, because this happened less than 100 kilometers away from the U.S. border with Arizona, and it hits home for a lot of people. The fact that there were children from the ages of 8 months to 12 years old killed, their mothers were killed. The fact that it was just a horrific attack. I mean, these cartels basically laid in a linear ambush on a highway. And I think everybody knows, but nobody wanted to admit that cartels, one, are heavily armed. We've seen that recently in the headlines. And I know a lot of pundits like to say, well, they get 70 to 80% of their arms from U.S. retailers. But the fact of the matter is, we've seen the kind of firepower that these cartels bring to bear. I mean, they're running, belt-fed machine guns. They're running anti-armor weapons, and they're running things that the American consumer can't have. I'm not going to speak in this episode as to the source of those weapons. Everybody has their opinion. I'll let you draw your own. But the fact of the matter is they laid in a linear ambush, and they killed 9, and some sources are now saying 12. A good buddy of mine at BK Actual on Twitter, he's got his own podcast, and he's a former pararescueman. He does great work. He's reporting, as of tonight, it was actually 12 family members were killed. And it just highlights the absolute insanity and the fact that Mexico is, for all intents and purposes, a failed state. The Mexican government is not able to secure its own internal security. Cartels are well-funded, well-armed, and well-trained. I mean, all you have to look to is the Los Zetos in Mexico. I mean, their ranks are flush with former Mexican commandos who bring knowledge to the fight. And that's absolutely unacceptable. And then you take all these other cartels who have so much money they don't know what to do with it. I mean, when we talk about money, we're not talking about money that you can actually count. We're talking about money that they have to weigh by the tractor trailer. That's how much cash these organizations are rolling with. And when you have money, you have access to resources that very few of us can comprehend. So when you take a look at this violence, it is horrific. I mean, from what I'm reading, and again, I have to preface by saying I am not an expert, but from what I'm reading here, they were just out for the day. And they were just moving from one town to the other. They weren't bothering anybody. And I don't care. Honestly, the New York Times, I don't care what Elizabeth Diaz has to say about colonialism or about how Americans are encroaching on Mexican territory. I really don't give a hoot what she has to say. The fact of the matter is at a minimum, 6 children were either shot or burned alive in the vehicles that they were riding in. And that is just horrific. President Trump heard about the story, and he tweeted out that he basically gave the Mexican president a offer to, quote, go to war with the cartels. You can say whatever his rationale is. Like I said, this story in particular, because I think it hits close to home, because it was finally Americans. Cartel violence has been going on for years. It is absolutely horrific. They're I apologize, but their propensity for violence knows no bounds. And I think a lot of people were blind to it. The media certainly wasn't reporting on it. But you throw Americans into the mix, and finally it grabs headlines. Trump tweeted out that he wanted to go to war. He wanted to partner up with the government of Mexico to go to war. and the president of Mexico declined the offer. And he didn't just decline it, but the way he phrased his response seemed to think that it was a joke, or he doesn't think this problem is all that serious, which is absolutely ludicrous. It is absolutely ludicrous. Mexico, like I had mentioned before, can't maintain its own security. The cartels have free reign. In the military, we call it freedom of maneuver. And that means that an entity, a force, a unit can move around a battle space uncontested. And that's basically what the cartels have right now. Now, the cartels kind of have their own little regions, and all the reporting out of this story is that the region that this family, the LeBaron family, was in was contested territory between two cartels, and that it was a potential case of stolen identity. And while that's tragic, it doesn't matter. All it shows is that the cartels are running the show, but the government of Mexico is not. I'm going to leave it at that because, like I said, I'm not that well spun up on the issue. But I wanted to talk about it. It is big news for the day. A lot of people are talking about that, and we're going to find out more as time goes on. I'm looking at this report right here. About 200 shell casings of .223 and 77 millimeter caliber guns were found on the scene. Obviously, okay, great. ABC, great reporting. Are you kidding me? 77 millimeter caliber guns. That's like naval. Those are like naval guns. 77 millimeter. I mean, that's the an M1A2 Abrams has a 120 millimeter gun. Again, we're not going to get into the disconnect between the media and simple facts when it comes to firearms. But that's all, when it comes to this, the story is still developing. We're going to see where it goes, how Mexico responds, if they even respond. I mean, geez. Cartel violence has been rampant for years and nothing has happened. But now that American citizens are enveloped into this story, we're going to see what's going on. I know a lot of veterans are they're reaching out. They're saying, "Hey, let's go up in arms," and I can kind of see that sensibility, that reaction. It's different when your own blood is spilled, and we're going to see how it plays out in the next couple days. But until then, we'll kind of sit on this story and we'll come back to it. All right, up next, Trump okays wider Syria oil mission. Now, I spent the majority of my time overseas in Syria, the vast majority, actually. I spent some time in Jordan and northern Iraq, in Erbil, in northern Iraq, with the Kurdish regional government, which I should say, because nobody's reporting on this, the Kurdish regional government, the Peshmerga, the functioning government within the Kurdish ethnic group in northern Iraq is totally different than the Rojava, which populates northern Syria and southern Turkey and encapsulates, the PKK and things like that. Going into this story, I'm going to say, honestly, I don't know what to make of this. This is a new development. President Trump ran on the promise of pulling out of Syria. We pull out of Syria, much to the dismay of a lot of pundits, a lot of so-called national security experts. God, I hate the term NatSec, especially online. Like, national security has a specific meaning. Online, it seems like any Joe standing tall can just claim the title, and if they have a large enough following, people listen to them. With, that it's like with me, like with just a bachelor's degree, claiming expertise on a subject. I don't claim, like, PhD, like, hey, I have think tanks and, the State Department, the DOD relying on my opinions. I'm not claiming that level of expertise, but I have, with my very limited education in combination with my experiences overseas, I like to think that I have at least a little bit of a better grasp on the situation on the ground. But on this story, Trump says he's pulling out. Everybody gets upset. He said that we're leaving our allies behind without them realizing that the Syrian defense forces that we were kind of cutting ties with were mostly, made up of PKK, for lack of a better term, terrorists. The United States had already designated the PKK as a terror organization. We saw them as a tool in our fight against ISIS. That was a decision made in the previous administration. And there are a couple of very important, very smart men with stars on their shoulders who testified in front of Congress that using the Syrian Democratic Forces, or SDF, was a PR move to rebrand the PKK so that we could use them in our foreign policy objectives of defeating ISIS, which is fine. That's nothing new. We've used less than stellar / seedy elements to achieve our foreign policy objectives in the past. The difference is when it comes to like the Arabs in the south of Syria that we partnered with when we cut ties during the previous administration, nobody batted an eye. Trump takes office, he cuts ties with the north, says, hey, this mission is done. Everybody loses their mind. Syria is it's a sticky wicket, to say the least. Do I think that pulling out of Syria was the right move? Yes. The mission was kind of being dragged out and expanded far beyond what we needed to do. The mission was very clear. The Title 10 mission, the Department of Defense mission in Syria, was the eradication of ISIS. ISIS went from a caliphate that had geographical land that it controlled. It was a de facto government in large swaths of Syria. And we reduced it to roving bands of fighters that had somehow survived the massive offensive by U.S. and partner forces and airstrikes and all sorts of nastiness that we directed their way. But after al-Baghdadi got schwacked, it seems that white side special operations forces, so like what I am, so you have white side and black side. You have black side special operations, those are your special mission units, your Delta Force, your SEAL Team 6. Then you have white side. Those are your SEALs, your Green Berets, your Rangers, your Air Force Pararescue, your Air Force Combat Controller. I would say your Air Force Weathermen, but those are gone. They've now replaced them with Special Reconnaissance, Air Force Special Reconnaissance. But again, I'm ranting. But Whiteside Soft moved back into Syria after al-Baghdadi got schwacked by Blackside Soft. And they are currently securing oil fields in northern Syria. And the administration is talking about how this is to counter any ISIS resurgence, to back up our Kurdish allies. And I should say those Kurdish allies are the Rojava Kurds. Those are not the Kurdish regional government. Kurds in northern Iraq, the ones that have a functioning government, the ones that we do have a partnership with, the Peshmerga that we fought alongside in Iraq. But the current administration is talking about how it's to support our Kurdish allies, the Rojava, the Syrian Democratic Forces, and to counter Iranian influence in the region. Now, Trump made a big deal about pulling out. It was a campaign promise. Love him or hate him, the decision to pull out of Syria was controversial, to say the least. Technically, it was a campaign promise. It shouldn't have surprised anybody, but all of a sudden we have U.S. Army Special Forces rolling back into northern Syria. And that's confusing even me. I get the excuses. I understand the whole, hey, let's counter, Iranian influence in the region. And the Iranians have started to flex a great deal more in the region than they had, 5-6 years ago. When I was over in Syria, the Iranians were backing what we called Shia militia groups in Western Iraq, and they were trying to influence, Iraqi parliamentary elections and bring in candidates who were sympathetic to Iranian causes. And it kind of all stems back to this Shia-Sunni divide in Iraq. But again, we're getting into the weeds here. That's not what this is about. But Iranians were flexing influence. They have a very capable special operations force they call Al-Quds. I don't speak Farsi, but Quds is the Arabic. Actually an Arabic word for Jerusalem. No, I don't know a whole lot about the history of Iran. My language and expertise when I was with fifth group was the Middle East, and my language was Arabic. I was not a Farsi speaker. I wasn't taught the culture and history of Iran. I kind of focused on the Levant, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, things like that. But anyways, I get the excuse, but I don't understand why they would make such a big deal about pulling out. Hey, promises made, promises kept, and then going back in. This oil facility, I don't think we don't have American oil oil workers there to scoop up the oil, so I don't think it's about oil. I know the optics on it are like, oh, the American military goes in to secure oil, and it's a repeat of what was going on in Iraq. But the optics are bad, so we're gonna see where that kind of leads. I'm gonna hold off my final judgment until to see if a clear mission emerges. But if we're there to counter Iranian, Russian, and Turkish influence in the region, I don't know why we have special forces ODAs, or what we call them operational detachment alphas, or ODAs. Those are special forces teams. Why we have them being photographed and videotaped literally next to oil fields. It's a bad look. I think the optics don't work. The Pentagon is kind of tight-lipped about what the mission is, so we're going to see where that leads. And again, like the previous story, we'll hopefully come back to it. All right, moving on. We're just moving right along. We're going to try and keep this short. I know if you guys are like me, your attention span is just garbage. I mean, it's current year. It's 2019. Everything comes in little blips. My God, we like everything fast and easy to digest. And let's face it, deep dives, they're not easy to digest. Oh, God. A lot of people say they hate the ruby grapefruit White Claw. And, if you're at a party with, people in their early 20s and there's White Claws being thrown around because I like to be hip and into the scene, I drink White Claw. I mean, plus it's only 100 calories. Got to watch that figure. But people don't like the ruby grapefruit, and it really is a shame because I like it. And people say, oh, it's the trashiest of all the flavors. Listen, I think it's delicious. Anyways, all right. We're kind of going to move away from the macro, what's going on beyond our borders, to what's going on within what the internet calls and I call mill Twitter. Now, if you guys are not familiar with mill Twitter, you should educate yourselves. So there are service members who are on Twitter, and a lot of them have a lot of influence. They have a lot of followers. They have the ears of important people, general officers, journalists, people that can, take the opinion of an E6 and elevate it, as if it were policy. It's pretty incredible, actually. And the majority of male Twitter is, I was going to say, leans left. I don't hide the fact that my personal politics, I am definitely right of center. I always used to tell myself that I was a libertarian, and then I kind of wisened up. I realized that libertarians' foreign policy is absolute garbage, and that you can't kind of just self-contain like it's 1903 anymore. We saw what that got us. But I don't hide the fact that I'm politically conservative. But mill Twitter is not. And it's kind of a weird dichotomy because the military in a whole, I would say, is conservative. But the online presence of the military is very much liberal. And I use that, like liberal as a party, not, the classic, not classical liberalism, but, leftist. And with that liberalism comes what a few people in the community called WokeVets, and that kind of stems from wokeness. What the left loves to say was like, "Oh, woke," "Oh, my eyes are open, I can see the truth," and that wokeness kind of leads to some awful opinions. Now, in the United States Army, like I said, I'm not gonna speak to things like other branches because I am in the Army. But in the United States Army, the big news right now is a new PT test. We went from the Army Physical Fitness Test, or the APFT, to the Army Combat Fitness Test, the ACFT, and this was implemented to create a gender-neutral fitness test to coincide with the incorporation of females into combat arms and to open up selection and assessment of special operations units, mainly the United States Army Rangers and the United States Army Special Forces, also known as Green Berets. Great. Again, we can definitely go into my personal opinions on things like women in special operations later. That's neither here nor there. What I am going to talk about is woke leftist mill Twitter railing on the new Army Combat Physical Fitness Test. And let me just remind you listeners at home, that the ACFT was created to encompass a gender-neutral standard. A gender-neutral standard. Great. The consensus among people who have taken it, including myself, it is much easier to pass than the old physical fitness test, but much more difficult to max. I'm not going to break down the tests by events, but there is one event that is causing a lot of controversy on Twitter and I guess in certain circles within the Army. And that is a little ditty I call the leg tuck. Basically, you're going to hang from a pull-up bar with your arms locked out, and then you're going to flex your arm in, and then you're going to raise your knees so that your knees touch your elbows. All right, seems simple enough. In the Special Forces Regiment, we had our own PT test called the Upper Body Round Robin, the UBRR. And we had a variation of that called kip-ups, where you hung on a pull-up bar, and you had to bring your feet over the bar and clap your feet together. All right, great. The kip-ups, I think to pass, you only need like 3. A lot of female soldiers are taking issue with it. And that's okay. It's a new event. Just like anything, you have to train for it, just like the old PT test. Nobody in the Army worked out by just doing push-ups, sit-ups, and running 2 miles. Like if you if you try to maintain your fitness in the Army, you were running further than 2 miles. You were in the gym. You were doing compound lifts and things like that. But when it came time to physical fitness test time, a lot of guys would have to train up for it. Like guys that lived in the gym or got really into functional fitness or CrossFit, they would find themselves having to do specific training to prep. They had to do regular Army sit-ups, regular Army push-ups. They had to train for a 2-miler to get that time down. This is no different. But woke Mill Twitter is taking they've decided that the hill that they want to die on is that this new test is sexist, because this knee to elbow movement is difficult for women. And let me say this. There are some female service members on Twitter that realize that this is difficult for them, and they are training for it, and then they go on and they say, hey, yeah, I could only do one, or I couldn't do one, but now I can do 5, I can do 6. Like, they're training for it. And awesome, more power to them. That's the way it should be. Like, they're soldiers. This is the army. Like, you have to accommodate the standard. The army does not accommodate to you. So they know the standard, they know what they have to do, and they're getting it done. Some service members, females, and then some really, I'm not going to call them white knights. I mean, maybe they're white knighting. Maybe they see a damsel in distress and they want to help them out. Or maybe they're just like, they see an injustice in the world. I don't know. I don't try to claim that I can get into the mind of a woke vet. Hashtag woke vet. Ridiculous. But anyways, they're kind of taking the side that this is a sexist test that is designed to kick women out of the military because this kip up variation is hard to do. Well, the big takeaway that came up on Twitter, and I'm not going to pull it up here because I'm not in the business of blasting individuals out and to target them for harassment. I'm really not. But one female service member with a very substantial reach on Twitter, with a lot of important people following every single thing that she says that the test is designed to discriminate against women who have had a C-section. And then she went as far as to say that in response to another service member who said, listen, we have service members who have lost legs. They've lost legs in combat. It was a traumatic amputation. In the dirty, filthiest corners of the world, they got their leg blown off, whether it be an IED, an RPG, a grenade, even small arms fire, a AK round to a large bone in the body that shatters can mean amputation. We have service members who lose a leg and they get back on the horse and they're doing deadlifts. They're doing back squats. They're getting back in the game, and that is awesome. That is highly motivating. And that's what being a professional soldier is all about. So he goes, I can't believe we have service members who can come back from a traumatic amputation, but we have females saying that because they've had a C-section, because they've had an incision in their abdominal muscles, they can't do this particular exercise. And military Twitter absolutely lost it. It was all about, this is a terrible take. This is why we hate the army. This is sexist. This is bigoted. My goodness gracious. And then they had the audacity to say, and I cannot believe I am relaying this, they had the audacity to say that the recovery for a C-section, the recovery for a cesarean section is more traumatic and more difficult than overcoming a traumatic amputation. And I could not believe it. We have reached absolute levels of wokeness I didn't think were possible. Are you kidding me? I can't believe that some females are going to say that a medical procedure that is highly routine, performed thousands of times a day, is a more difficult road to recovery than losing a leg in combat. And that is, if I have to say it, that is peak Mill Twitter. And that is peak victimhood and playing the victim and loving that victim card at every moment. And one, it shows a couple of things. If they're just going to keep making excuses, like maybe we... You know what? I'm not even going to say that. I'm not even going to say that because I don't want to get... I'm trying not to get dragged yet. This is a hill I am willing to die on, though. That the fact that losing a leg due to traumatic amputation in combat is far worse than a C-section. Now, you're probably thinking to yourself, Nick, you're not a female. You don't know what a C-section is like. And you're right, I don't. So, I talked to a female, mainly my mother. I know. But I did ask her if she is a medical professional. She is a woman. She's never had a C-section, but she knows plenty of women who have. Recovery for a C-section, yeah. She says, 6 to 8 weeks, maybe 6 to 8 months for a full recovery. But 6 to 8 weeks that you can start getting physical again. And that's awesome. Get back at it. But the recovery for losing a leg is going to be far longer than that. And the ramifications of that injury, the potential infection and complications, and having to learn to walk again and to develop muscles that didn't have to do that much work, and now you're putting all your weight on one side or things like that. Like this is craziness. This is peak leftism in the military, and I think it's really a testament to what the military has become. And I'm not going to badmouth the military because I love the military. Sorry, White Claw break. For you just listening and you can't see. You guys remember that Chocolate Rain video where he puts in the little words, I move my face away from the mic to breathe? Yeah, that's what I did when I swallowed. So you didn't have to listen to that gulp. But there's a former Marine by the name of James Hassan, and he's a smarty pants, and he kind of went the Ivy League route after his time in the Marine Corps. I know, shocking. A Marine can read, not just eat the crayons they used to I didn't mean to swear. To freaking practice their ABCs. But he wrote a great book about how the military is becoming this petri dish for social justice and, social engineering, things like that. And really, it's pretty telling just on its own, but then you actually see it in real life, and then you realize how spot on it is. These are females who have totally forgotten the fact that they're professional soldiers, and that they have a standard to meet, and they need to meet it. That's the Army. That's the military. The military is not a civilian employer. It's not an equal opportunity employer. It never should be. The military and the Army in particular, it specifically is a killing business. We are in the business of killing. We destroy the enemies of the United States by fire and maneuver. And there's a lot of jobs that go into that in the back end, and that's great. Like, everybody plays their part. I'm not gonna look down on somebody for the job that they do in the military. But when you boil it down, the job of the military is to kill people. I know that's distasteful and it leaves a bad taste on people's tongues, and they don't want to face that reality, and they want to say, "Hey, this is the United States military, and I should be able to serve." Well, listen, if you can't meet the standards, maybe you shouldn't be serving. It's that simple. I hate it. It sounds callous and it sounds cruel, but I'm not going to apologize for it. The standard is the standard. If the Army says it is important for you to put your knees to your elbows as you hang, do a flex arm hang from a pull-up bar, you have to do it. We're going to see where this one goes to. I have a feeling this isn't going away. People have been complaining about this ACFT for months now, and they've been playing the whole this is a sexist move for months now. All right. In the same vein of woke vets, you have your average woke vets who just they want to vote for Bernie, or they want to vote for Elizabeth Warren, and gender identity and gender politics is super important to them. And to that, I say that is okay. Everybody's entitled to their personal political opinion. That said, I've been seeing a couple of woke vets who are ultra woke, and they are mouthpieces for a little organization I like to call, I call them LARPers. I like to call them LARPers. If you're not familiar with the term, it's live action role player. It's people who get together on the weekends and they dress up like wizards and witches and dwarves and knights, and they have battles, and it's great, and that's their prerogative, and that's awesome. I'm so glad people can find healthy outlets for the things they like to do. But the term has been co-opted for people who don't have a certain background but like to pretend that they have a background. And a group called the John Brown Gun Club is the perfect encapsulation of a LARPer. You have far leftists who finally got a taste of gun fever, and they realize that all the pamphlets in the world and all the hug circles and the protesting speakers they don't agree with, it wasn't getting them anywhere. So they decide to arm up. Their namesake is John Brown, the famous abolitionist who totally took on the government of the United States in order to free slaves. And John Brown was a total bamf. That dude was awesome. He had his own personal little boogaloo going there. He saw an injustice with the United States government, and he attempted to rectify it. And he did die a martyr. The feds got him in the end. But his name and his work have been co-opted by the far left, who are so entrenched in identity politics that the idea that John Brown was willing to die for, that all men are created equal, to be judged by the content of an individual and not by any sort of racial or gender or any intersectional characteristic. That was John Brown's shtick. Everybody should be judged on their character. Nobody should be owned just because you're one ethnicity doesn't make you any better than the rest. But far leftists who love intersectionality, yeah, that's a word, intersectionality, they've co-opted John Brown's awesomeness, and this is what we have. And the John Brown Gun Club, these far leftists, they get together and they go shoot at ranges, and it is absolutely hysterical to watch. They are terrible shooters. They have zero idea when it comes to tactics or what they're going to need to do in order to accomplish their stated goals when they finally gather the courage to do something about it or something. But anyways, it was always a joke. But we're starting to see like what I'm calling ultra woke vets on Twitter, and they are starting to join the ranks of the John Brown Gun Club, and that's not good. I don't know what these veterans' backgrounds are, but the far left, they love they like pushing communist ideas, socialist ideas, things like that. Things that I've always advocated have no business in a polite society. If you ask me, communists are just as awful as Nazis. They really are. Both people are utter garbage. And that, again, that's a hill I'm willing to die on. They are utter garbage. They are terrible human beings. Both ideologies killed millions of people. It's awful. But Nazis are rightfully shunned in our society. And we say Nazis they're awful. And they absolutely are. Hate Nazis. God. But in our society, for some bizarre, arcane, asinine reason that I cannot put my finger on, we allow communists to exist. And not saying it was a kill of communists, but what I am saying is we allow them to share their stupid ideology, and nobody shames them the way we shame Nazis. So now you have these far left vets, and they're joining these organizations. And statistically, some of these vets are combat veterans, and they come from combat arms, and they can teach things like tactics. This is an issue. The United States government tracks neo-Nazis in the United States military. They identify them, they get them out. If they did something illegal, if they were selling guns or explosives to their stupid, inbred, white trash hick cousin, that's prison time. But they track that kind of thing, and a lot of journalists track that. But nobody's tracking these vets or members of the United States military that are part of these far left organizations, and they are just as dangerous. And I'm going to say, nowadays, I'm going to say that the far left organizations are far more dangerous than the far right organizations, because your average Nazi clan, they're going to get together, they're going to put on their stupid little fleck turn outfits, the World War II camo that the German army used. They're going to go out in the woods and they're going to fly a banner, and they're going to look stupid as hell. They are fat, they're out of shape, they don't know the first thing that they're doing, and we rightfully mock them. But the far left has shown that they have a propensity for violence. They've created a martyr. I'm not even going to say the guy's name. I know nobody's listening to this, but in my mind, I have a great audience. I have thousands of adoring fans. So in my mind, I have this audience. So I'm not even going to say this guy's name, because we really shouldn't be, creating heroes and legends out of people, just like school shooters. But you all know who I'm talking about. He was a member of the John Brown Gun Club, and he attempted to firebomb an ICE detention facility. And he was just awful at it. Dude got schwacked before he could do anything. It was just, it was pathetic. It was terrible. And it totally represents how inept your average, we constituted, far left. I hate, you don't want to devolve into using, terms like soy fueled and things like that. But if you look at the guy, he did not have the capacity to really do any sort of damage. Like, you look at the guy and you're like, oh my God. But anyways, he got schwacked trying to firebomb an ICE facility. I'm starting to see a lot of far left vets, idolize the dude as a martyr, and that's an issue. Like, we're starting to see that. We're starting to see violence with Antifa. They're identifying people. They have this self-appointed moral high ground, which makes them a very dangerous adversary, because they think that they're they think that they're right morally, and it couldn't be farther from the truth. But they think they're right morally because they believe fascists are evil, and fascists are evil, and we have no place for that in this republic and this society. We shun fascists, but according to them, everybody to the right of them is a fascist, and they start identifying people as fascists, and they start pointing fingers, and in their minds, it makes it morally okay to do violence against these people who are average people. They don't know the first thing about Nazism or fascism. They happen to be a little conservative. But we're starting to see veterans kind of some far left veterans gravitate towards that. I think that's really something that the United States should really start looking. I don't put a whole lot of faith in the government, and to be quite frank, I think the government oversteps its bounds in a lot of ways. Let's just say that. But if they're going to be tracking far right veterans and service members, as they should also be tracking far left veterans and service members, and nobody's doing that right now. And we're starting to see some. Again, I'm not gonna pull up individuals and put them on blast here, because that's not what this is about. But just kind of speak to the idea. Oh man. And that's about it, guys. I know. My God, we were all over the place. I apologize. It was my first time doing this. I'm very new. I'm a podcast virgin. You guys know how it is. It's very, very intimidating. But hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully this was, just something that you could listen to. I don't even care if it's white noise for you while you do, real things, important things. I don't care if you keep me on in the background. So hopefully this it gives you a little rundown of what went on during the day. I'm going to try and do this a couple times a week. We'll see, schedule permitting. And like I said, as this develops, as hopefully I find somebody that can edit things and do things like that, we can add some like music and make it sexy. If I can find the right people to do that, That would be awesome. And as this develops, we can bring in people who are way better at this than I am. They have educated, informed opinions that they know things, and we can bring them in and they can talk, and I can just shut up and listen and maybe learn a thing or two while they go off on their CV backed opinions, and you guys might learn a little something, because they're not gonna learn anything from me. My God, I'm looking at master's programs right now. I'm like, God, I'm too stupid to get a master's. I barely have a bachelor's. But that was fun for me, guys. It gave me a chance to kind of just push out all the crap I've been holding in all day, things that I found interesting throughout the day. Hopefully you enjoyed it too. If you like it, I don't know. God, I've watched a lot of YouTube videos. Hit a thumbs up, subscribe, leave a comment. Right now, I'm not going to ask for money or something. Like, this is just for me. So hopefully it was something good for you, or at least not bad. It was definitely good for me, but like I said, I'm a virgin, so I don't know what I like. But appreciate it, guys. Hope you guys had a good time, and I'll see you guys next time.